So at Law Firm Success Group, we're experts when it comes to helping attorneys reach that next level, whether it's more income, more time off, less stress, really helping them build their perfect practice. And this is our manifesto. It's what our clients believe, and it's the mindset that I want you to have for our discussion today. I want you to be all in. I want you to be really engaged and ready to get at least one powerful aha moment that you can apply to your practice. I think if you have that, that'll be a good use of your time today. So as far as what we're covering in our agenda, we're going to be going through a few different things. We're going to be talking about adaptation and making some changes. It's really important if you want to get different results that you make some changes, right? Otherwise, if you don't make changes, we'll just be getting the same results over and over and over again. And I know none of you want that. So we're going to be talking about adaptation, a couple of different models on how to do that, and then how to apply those models into your law firm to help you convert more clients. We're also going to be talking about execution, actually following these models, going through the right sequence, preparing for success. And then last, but certainly not least, we're going to get really tactical and talk about improvement, some really specific techniques that you can use to improve your ability to convert clients. And then we'll wrap it up with a Q&A. So that's what we're going to be covering today. And so with that, I want to talk a little bit about client conversion first. And what do I actually mean by that? Well, what we mean when we talk about client conversion is it's what happens during that initial consultation when a PC, a potential client, is converted to an actual client, when they sign the fee agreement, when they pay the retainer. That's what we're talking about. Here's a quick example. So let's say there's an attorney named Amanda, and Amanda does 10 consultations per month on average. And on average, 5 of those become her clients. So 5 out of 10, her conversion rate is 50%. Now, 50% is low. That conversion rate should be 80%. And here's a quick tip. If you're not already, please, please, please track your consultations to make sure you know what percentage of those convert to actual clients. Okay. So there's 2 pieces to maximizing your success at this stage of client conversion. The first is communication. We're going to cover that today, and we're going to be using the DISC model to talk about communication. The second is process. We're going to be using a standard consultative sales process. And yes, by the way, if you have any doubt at all, you are in sales if you're an attorney. So here's the thing. One small tweak in either communication or process can make all the difference and can have huge results and big impact on your law firm and on your success with converting clients. So let's just focus on what you can do just a little bit better. You don't have to learn a whole new skill. You don't have to step way outside your comfort zone. It's just taking what you can from today's webinar and just focusing on 1 or 2 small tweaks that you can make, some small shifts that you can make, because those small shifts can drive huge results back into your practice. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is communication. And when we talk about communication, there's 3 parts to it. And unfortunately, we tend to focus on the wrong thing. We tend to focus on that smallest piece of the pie, which is actually the words and content that we use. What we should be focusing on is all 3 pieces: words and content, voice tone, body language, and the energy that you exude. People tend to focus on the words, but as we're going through this, we're focusing on all 3: words, voice, and body language. And as we do that, there are 4 basic styles, and this is from the DISC model. People are a blend of all 4 of these styles, and the primary style is what's most noticeable when you're talking with the person. So they may be using other styles at other points in throughout their day, but what's important is the style that they're using with you as a potential client, right? And you're the attorney. So let's go through all 4 of those real quick. The first one is a director style. They really like to take charge. It's about 19% of the population, the US population, falls into that as their primary style. The second style is influencer. And that's about 1/3 of the population. So quite a large number of the population fall into that influencer style. And we're going to talk about what each of these styles are and characteristics of these styles real quick immediately following this. But influencers are ones that love to influence people to their points of view. The third one is steady relator. That is the most popular style in the US. 35% are steady relators. and they like to keep things kind of steady and calm. And the last style, but certainly not least, at 14% of the population are the compliant analyzers, and they're going to like to follow the rules. So it's important to know that this is separate from your training as an attorney. Okay, this is how you naturally are. It's not necessarily how you practice law. This does also, by the way, if you're wondering, this does map very well to social styles. You may have heard of those, which is driver, expressive, amiable, and analytical. It's close enough. Those 4 styles just kind of line up well with the DISC styles that you see here. So with that, let's go ahead and just launch our first poll. Yanni, why don't you go ahead and bring that up for us?
Sure thing. Let's see. Polling.
Awesome. So the first poll question is, have you completed a DISC assessment? If you have, go ahead and click yes. If not, go ahead and click no. I just want to see how many of you are somewhat familiar with this DISC model.
Coming up at 67% voted. Give you guys 10 more seconds.
Yeah, if you don't know what the DISC model is, just go ahead and click no.
All right, I'm going to end polling now, and let's see the results.
How do we? Okay, so 17% yes and 83% no. Okay, great. That's terrific. So what I'm giving you today is just going to be a quick primer on DISC. There's a lot more that we can go into. We don't have time, unfortunately, to do it all today, but we'll get going. So the DISC model, DISC, happens to line up to the 4 styles that are on your screen: Director, D; Influencer, I; Steady Relator, S; and Compliant Analyzer, C. So each of the letters stands for one of the 4 behavior styles that you see there. So we're going to do a quick exercise where you're going to determine your DISC style. Now, when we go through this with our clients, it's an online survey. It takes like a half an hour to fill out. It's a very exhaustive report. This is going to be like a really quick exercise. But it's also great training if you ever want to identify the DISC style of the person across the table from you or on the other side of the Zoom screen. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and those 2 questions are going to help you quickly determine which DISC style you're using right now. So the first question is, when you're typically in a social situation, are you outgoing or are you more reserved? Right? Knowing that at some point in time, you're both of those, but in general, in a social situation, you walk into a room where you don't know people, are you going to be more outgoing or are you going to be more reserved? Okay. There's no polling or chat questions. I just want you to answer that question for yourself. So that's the first question. Are you outgoing or reserved? The second question is, when you're focusing on an issue, do you tend to focus on the task of the issue first, or do you tend to focus on the people first? There's no right or wrong answer here. But some people tend to focus on the tasks first. What do we need to get done? And other people tend to focus on the people first. How's everyone doing? The answers to these questions will tell you kind of what DISC style is your most dominant style. And here's how we figure this out. So we can map in the different DISC behavior styles right into there. So if you're up here, your task, and you're outgoing, that's going to be that D style, that dominant director style. If you're outgoing and you like hanging out with people a lot, you're going to be that influencer style. If you're more reserved, but you like hanging out with people, so maybe smaller groups of people, you're going to be that steadiness, that S. And if you're reserved and you like focusing on tasks over people, you're going to be more C, which is more compliant. And again, everyone's a blend of all 4 styles. This is just a quick exercise for you to get a grasp of what style is yours. Each of the styles have different things that they're really good at, different things that they can work on. And by the way, there's no best style for practicing law, as it turns out. So Yanni, if you could go ahead and launch the poll, we're going to ask you which DISC style you put down. And this is an anonymous poll, so we're not going to know unless you tell us. By the way, as you're thinking about which one you put down there, this is the exact process that we go through. But we teach people to do this, to identify the disc style of the person that they're talking with, very quickly answering those two questions. Are they being more reserved and outgoing with you? Are they more focused on the task or the people? Because the answers to those questions are going to drive how you should communicate with them. So Yanni, how are we doing on the poll?
I think we've got the amount that we're going to get. Let's see what the results are.
Look at that. So we have a very different distribution from the US population. Typically, we've got about, the US population has about 14% C. We have almost half the people on this call are C. The US population has, so the D's are right on. The I's and S's are usually over 30% of the population. And right now on this webinar, they're in the minority at 17% and 20% respectively. So we've literally flipped the US population kind of on its head, which is pretty cool. Awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing that. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about these styles. What are these 4 styles? Well, as we go through them, and this is the one for the D behavior style, the director style, I want you to really focus on the do's and the don'ts. So this is what you should do when you're interacting with someone that is using this style. And this is what you should not do when you're interacting with someone who uses this style. If you do these things, you're going to build trust faster. If you do these things, it's going to be hard for you to build trust and build a really good relationship with the person. Okay. And this is someone who you don't know. So this generally does not apply to family members or close friends or anything like that. But this definitely applies to potential clients. So that's the D style. The next one we have is the I style. You can see some of the key characteristics and identifiers. And again, focus on the do's here and the don'ts. Isn't it interesting how different they are from the D? So interacting with an I, you have to completely shift and communicate in a very different way than you would if you're interacting with someone who is that D style. And then it takes us to S. And again, the do's and don'ts are different from the previous 2. So interacting with someone with this S behavior style, you're going to want to use a different way of communicating than you did with the other 2. And don't worry if you don't get all of this. Again, this is all in the slides as well as in the workbook that you'll be getting. And the last one, which is the C style, yet again, it's a different way of interacting than with the previous 3. So what you want to do is different. What you don't want to do is different. And this is the whole heart of the DISC model and why this can be so effective for working with potential clients, because we tend to communicate with everyone the same way. Unfortunately, if we do that, each of these styles has a very different way of communicating. And you can see that here. So this blue style is going to be your C. Sorry, I'll start over. Red is D, yellow is I, green is S, and blue is C. So D, I, S, and C. And you'll note that what you should be doing, which are the top 3 bullets, and what you shouldn't be doing, which are the bottom 3 bullets, that's what you should not be doing. Those really vary from style to style to the extent that what you should be doing for one style, so for the C here, is what you should not be doing for this I style. Okay, if you do that, it's going to create tension, dissatisfaction, and the interaction. So the challenge with this is most of us tend to use our most comfortable communication style most of the time. And unfortunately, each of the styles have very different ways of communicating. So if you use the right style for a person, you're going to build rapport and trust faster. You're going to get through that know, like, and trust. All of that's going to happen faster. And as you know, trust is everything when it comes to hiring an attorney. So there are potentially maybe other ways that we can apply this as well. And you might be thinking of some of those. Let's go ahead and launch our next poll, and let's talk about how DISC is really, really effective and how it can help. Okay. So this is not, you can answer more than one of that. So how can adapting your DISC style, taking it from where you naturally are to one of these other 3, how can that help? Will it help you sign more clients? Will it help you get more referrals? Would it help you build and interact and build a stronger team? Or will it help with better client service? Let's go ahead and check all that apply.
I'm going to give folks about 10 more seconds.
Terrific. I'm looking forward to these results. So please, if you haven't already, go ahead and answer.
All righty, let's see what those results look like.
All right, sign more clients is the winner with 91%, followed by better client service, getting more referrals, and better teamwork. And there was not an all of the above question. So kudos to you that checked off all 4 of those, because this model, the DISC model of communication and adapting your communication style actually helps in each of these situations. It will absolutely help you sign more clients. That's why I'm featuring it today. It will also help you get more referrals, because now your referral sources, it'll help you cultivate newer referral sources faster and better referral sources. And your existing referral sources will appreciate the efforts you're making to build communication with them. So that will help you get more referrals. It also absolutely helps with better teamwork within the firm, as well as working with partners and other attorneys and other service partners outside of the firm too. And last, but certainly not least, there's some clients that are, they just want the answer really fast and they're really impatient. There's other clients that really want to talk everything out. And so changing and adapting your communication style for the client based on their DISC can really help you adjust your service so they feel really good about the level of service they're getting. And that results in their mind in much, much better client service, which also, by the way, drives more referrals as well. So thank you all for answering that. There's no question about it. Mastering this skill, being able to adapt your style based on recognizing the style of the other person, can make a huge difference in your success rate at converting clients and many other key areas of your practice. And yes, we do DISC trainings for law firms and individual attorneys. The key thing, again, if you're taking something away from this portion of the webinar, is to go through that analysis where you ask those 2 questions. Is the person across from you, are they more reserved or are they more outgoing? It's the first question. The second question is, are they more focused on the task or are they more focused on the person or the people? That's the second question. If you answer those 2 questions, you can generally peg the DISC style they're using with you. And then based on that, you can use this chart to determine what it is that you need to do. Now, oftentimes this is best done before you actually meet with them. So based on your email interaction or your phone call, you can make a guess here and then prepare to adapt your approach so that when you meet with them, you'll be communicating with them in the way that they want to be communicated with. As you get more and more proficient with this, you'll be able to do it on the fly, no problem. But for starters, it helps to think about this actually before that first meeting. Okay, so that is DISC. It's an incredibly powerful tool, and it's something that we work with our clients on when they're trying to build their book of business or they're trying to increase their client conversion rate. So now we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about the process side of things. We're going to go from communication to process. And I'm just letting you know, if you don't know this already, lawyers are salespeople. I'm sorry, but you are. But it's also consultative selling. It's educational selling, which means it's classy, it's honorable, it's ethical. It's about finding the best fit for the client. And for that kind of a sale, for that consultative sale, there is a sequence to it. And this is the sequence right here. Now, why do I present this as a specific sequence? And why do I present it as this sequence? Well, if you think about a time when maybe you went out of sequence, you didn't follow this step-by-step process. Let's say you met with somebody and you skipped over step 1, you skipped over step 2, you jumped right into step 3 and started talking about the services that you offer and how you can help the client with their situation, and talking about your experience and your expertise and where you went to law school and those kinds of things. And then you skipped over step 4 and went straight to step 5, which is close, and asked them to sign the fee agreement, right? What was the ultimate result of that experience when you went out of order? You probably didn't sign the client. Okay. So The reason we lay it out in this order is because this is the order that's required to really build trust as you go through the process, so that when you're ready to ask them for the retainer and you're ready to ask them to sign the fee agreement, they now have enough trust with you to go ahead and do that. It also makes it super easy for us to figure out when to move from one step to the next, because very simply, the goal of each step, the only goal of each step, is just to take the next one. So when you're in the step of building the relationship with the client, you're not thinking about closing the client. That's way down the road. The only thing you should be thinking about is if you're building a relationship well with the client, if you think they're going to be a good client, if you're both getting along really well, okay, great. Let's move on to identifying their needs. If, on the other hand, you have all sorts of yellow flags and red flags going off in your brain and you're saying, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to do this, I don't know if I want to take this client on, then maybe you're best off stopping at step one and making a referral to someone else who might be a better fit. So the goal of each step is just to take the next one if it's appropriate, if the prospect is a good fit, if you're willing, and if they're willing. So I'm going to go through these steps in order here real fast. Building the relationship we've just covered. It's all about getting to know somebody. It's building rapport. Then we move into identifying needs, which are talking about what is going on in their life that's making them reach out to you, or what's going on in their business that's making them reach out to you. The presentation portion is where, once you understand what their needs are, now you're able to present your services in a way that's a really good fit for their needs. Okay. Then you address any objections they have to moving forward with you. And then finally, you ask them for the business. You ask them for the retainer, you ask them to sign the fee agreement, and boom, you've got a new client. So these are the 5 steps. And what oftentimes happens when people go into trainings is they'll talk all about, okay, well, let's talk about how to close and how to sign a client. And it's all focused on that. But we want to do things a little bit differently today. Today, we're going to leverage the power of compounding, of making small incremental improvements, because since each step depends on the one before, if we get a little better at each step, the cumulative effect is really significant. And it's so much easier to make a couple of small changes than it is to become a student of one of these steps and make a lot of really big, uncomfortable changes. So we're just talking about just getting a little bit better. We find it's efficient, it's easier, and it'll still yield great results. Here's what I mean. Now this shows the 5 different stages here, a 10% improvement in the cumulative improvement. Don't worry about the math. I'm just going to explain it to you right now. So again, let's go back to our example with Amanda. Let's say she does 10 consultations per month, of which 5 become clients. So her conversion rate there is going to be 50%, right? We've talked about that. She signs 5 out of 10. That's a conversion rate of 50%. Now let's say Amanda improves by 10% in each of the 5 focus areas. So she just gets a little bit better in each of these 5 focus areas. Well, if that happens, the cumulative effect is big. She goes from 50% client conversion rate all the way up to 80% client conversion rate, which means when she does those 10 consultations, she now gets 8 clients out of those 10. That makes a world of difference for her practice. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what you can do just by getting a little bit better at each of these 5 stages. So we're not just going to leave it like that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to dig into some very specific techniques. I just want to pause here, though, to check in with Iani and see if we have any questions.
Doesn't look like any questions so far.
Okay, great. Again, if you have questions, please type it in the chat or please put it in the Q&A window. I know I'm throwing a lot at you very quickly here. So we're going to go through 5 of these techniques. These are things that you can put into practice right away in your law firm. So when we talk about building a relationship, we're going to go through a technique that I call care first. For identifying needs, the tactic is ask then listen. For offering services, it's paint a picture. For addressing objections is be prepared. And then securing the client, we're going to cover a technique called clear then close. Okay, we're going to cover each of these in order. And please ask questions and jump in if you have any questions. So the first technique is caring first. And this comes from the phrase you've probably heard of: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You could be the smartest, sharpest, most experienced attorney, but if they don't know that you care about their situation, they might not hire you. And the thing about it is people make decisions based on emotions. When you think about, buying a car or picking out a piece of clothing to wear, or making any kind of the decision to start your own firm, right? Those decisions are based on emotions, and then they're justified with facts. And I know, because I've been through all those things, and I've done the analysis, and I've made the pros and cons boxes, and I've done the financial models, and I've done all that stuff. It always comes down to assumptions. It always comes down to assumptions, which is basically, how do I think this is going to go? Do I think I'm going to get a lot of clients, or do I think I'm not going to get any? That's an emotional decision, because you're thinking about the future. You don't know. You don't know at all. So it comes down to emotions. And the same thing is true about a lot of other things. At the end of the day, no matter how we justify things with facts, that decision's usually made on an emotional level. And that definitely holds true for big purchases, and for highly trust, for trust focused relationships. It's all about this. And so that's why caring is so, so important, is because it makes that emotional connection. Then you can then they can justify it with facts, the experience level, the expertise, the certifications, all of those things. But that initial conversation, that initial meeting, making that emotional connection, that is really what sets it up. And there's this law in selling called the law of indirect effort, which is that the more you focus on the relationship, just focus on the client, focus on building rapport with them, the more likely the client is to engage you. And this comes through really, really loud and clear. You've probably seen this too, right? If someone is trying to convince you to make a change, whether it's to buy something or to do something else, and they're always focused on, kind of winning or getting you to agree, right? They're focused on the outcome, but they're not really engaged with you right now. They're not really listening to you right now. That shows, right? As opposed to someone who puts the outcome aside and says, okay, let's talk about you. Let's talk about your situation. And, we'll go from there. They're 100% focused on you. They're 100% focused on what you're trying to do. And that is going to build trust faster than anything else that can be done. So following that law of indirect effort, making that emotional connection, really showing them how much you care, is definitely the way to go. The second technique we're going to cover now is ask, then listen. Oftentimes, as attorneys, you have to be the smartest person, right? Intelligence, experience, these things are so, so important in the practice of law. And it's important to show a client that you're obviously smart and you know what you're doing, and you're very experienced, and you can handle their situation with a ton of confidence. The thing about it is that the best way to show that you're really experienced is to ask amazing questions, because asking those questions, a great question makes you look super smart, first of all, but asking those questions is going to build trust and credibility way faster than talking about how great you are as an attorney and the verdicts you've had and the situations you've sorted out. Because asking and then listening provides a lot of clarity and depth on their needs. It really helps you to get in there and figure out what's going on. It really helps you issue spot. It allows you to then control how that conversation goes. And it allows you to not just talk about your expertise in abstract terms, but now you can connect it exactly to their needs. So every time you guys have an interaction, every time you're talking about your expertise, it's directly related to their need. Not only that, but asking great questions shows them that you're engaged. It shows them that you care. And it shows them that you're probably going to do a really good job for them. So if you're not familiar or comfortable asking these questions so early on in the process, one thing to do is to have written questions available, or to use some type of an intake questionnaire. Again, preparation here can really help. So if you're not the kind of person that is comfortable asking those questions, those deep questions, those open-ended questions, and really digging in deeply early, it's okay. You can go ahead and prepare by having these questions ready to go. Oftentimes, that is the key for those of us who are not great at improvising. We get to go ahead and prepare. And then here's another tip. When you are listening to the potential client, it's great to take notes. I love it when attorneys do that. But avoiding the okay, okay. Avoiding that by recapping and summarizing back. And so here's an example of what that might look like. I understand. So let me just pause you there. I want to make sure I've got everything. So what I've heard is this. There's 3 real issues that are going on. And then you go through point 1, point 2, point 3. Did I catch those right? Is there anything else? Right. And so that shows the client that not only are you listening to them, but that you're able to take all the information that they're just coming at you with, and you're able to distill it down into the most important points. Builds huge trust and really showcases your expertise and experience when you can do something like that. And all of you that are listening to this can do exactly that. The next technique is what we call painting a picture. And this goes back to a formula, but don't worry, there's no math involved. It's a formula for change. It's called Glycerous Formula. And the idea behind this is that when a potential client is looking to work with us, they're looking to make a change, right? They don't have us as their counsel now, and they're looking to hire us. That change, in order to make the change, they have to overcome some resistance, which we're just going to call R. Okay. So the change has to be strong enough. The reason the change has to be strong enough to overcome the resistance. And there's 3 things, 3 contributing factors to drive that. One is their dissatisfaction with their current situation. That's the D. The other is a positive vision for how things can get better, right? Because if they're really unhappy with their current situation, but things can't get better, well, they're probably just going to deal with what they've got right now. The third component is having some really clear first steps. So once again, if they're really unhappy with their situation and they see how things can get better, but they don't know how to even get started, again, they're probably not going to do anything. Okay. So making sure that they're really unhappy with their current situation, number 1, that they have a positive vision for how things can get better, number 2, and that they have clear, simple, easy to do first steps on how to move from dissatisfaction with their current situation to their positive vision. Those 3 elements are all critical to overcome the resistance. So those 3 elements together have to be greater than R to make the change. And what's really cool about this is that the opposite also applies. If you're missing dissatisfaction, if there's no dissatisfaction, if there's no positive vision for how things can get better, if there's no first steps, no clear first steps on what they need to do to address their situation, if any one of those things is missing, you can see, right? If it's 0, then this whole side is 0, and you're never going to be able to overcome resistance. So sometimes when a client's talking with you, they typically know what their dissatisfaction is, right? Typically, it's pretty obvious, but they may have to be reminded by you about how things can get better, a positive vision, a positive outcome that they can have. And they definitely will need your help to understand the clear first steps that they have to take. 2 good ones are, paying the retainer and signing the fee agreement, sure. So, but in addition to hiring you, what's the next step after that? So it needs to be really simple as possible, no more than 2 or 3 things that they need to do to get started on the process to overcoming their resistance. And so oftentimes what we need to do, and this is why it's called painting a picture, we've got to encourage the client to think about what these 3 things look like, right? They're dissatisfied, but how dissatisfied are they really? What is the impact of the situation on them? I'm hearing a little bit of there may be an audio mishap. Can you hear me okay? Yanni, you want to jump in and let me know if the audio is, oh, okay. Thank you, Talia.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, see, as I was saying, you may have to remind them about really what the impact is of their current situation. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm glad to hear that. You also may have to remind them about the positive vision for how things can get better, because they're in a dark place right now oftentimes. Typically when they call, their dissatisfaction may be really high, but their positive vision of how things can get better, they might really need your help to realize that. And lastly, as we mentioned, the first steps, that is totally under your control to make that clear to them and easy for them to do. If all three of these things are really strong, they're going to go ahead and make a change and hire you as their attorney. All right, let's move on to the next technique, which is called be prepared, for those of you that are in scouting. And this has to do with handling objections. Objections are the questions or the concerns that people have before they make a decision to hire you. Things like price, things like timing, those kinds of things. So here's the thing about objections that's so interesting. They're actually buying signals. Objections are a good thing because it shows that the person you're talking with is engaged, they're listening. It's a necessary part of getting through and signing the client is to address whatever objections that they have. So to have those objections, it's a good sign that things are moving in the right direction. If there's no objections, it probably means they don't trust you enough yet to talk about them. So objections should definitely be welcomed because it demonstrates that they're interested in moving forward and that they trust you enough to bring those up, right? As opposed to just sitting there quiet while you're talking and then at the end saying, okay, well, I don't have any questions. I'm just going to think about it. And then they go and you never hear from them again, right? So having those objections, voicing those to you, it really demonstrates interest and trust. The thing about it is until all of their objections are addressed, whether they told you about it or not, if they have an objection that has not been addressed, they are not going to sign your fee agreement. So you've got to address all their questions and all their objections before they will sign, whether they let you know about them or not. So that can be kind of a tall order, right? If someone's not saying their objection to you, then how can you possibly address it? Well, here's how you can do it. And this is why it's called be prepared. There's only typically 4 to 6 different objections that you'll get, and you'll get different flavors of those things. So one is price, right? By the way, price is seldom the most important factor, right? Seldom the most important factor, but price is one of them. The other ones are around your credibility. So have you done this before? Have you worked with people like myself? What certifications do you have? Basically all speaking to your expertise with the situation. The other one is time. Oh, it sounds like a lot of work. I don't know that I really have the time to deal with all this right now. I have a lot going on. Maybe, when things kind of settle down, then we'll look at, registering for that trademark, whatever it happens to be. So those are typically the issues. They're typically around, credibility and expertise. They're typically around, do they have the time? And they're typically around price. That's pretty much it. And so you're actually able to anticipate what those objections are because you get them all the time. So just think about, okay, what are the 4 to 6 different objections that I get? And you have an opportunity to write out your responses to those objections in advance and be prepared to use them. I'm always surprised when I'm, in a sales situation and I'm the one, having a conversation with someone and they're asking me to do business with them. So they're on the sales side, I'm the potential client. And I ask them an objection and they act like it's something they've never heard of before. There's only 4 to 6 of them. We hear the same ones over and over and over again. So let's go ahead and write them down. Let's come up with our responses that are really good responses. And let's not be surprised when they come up because they're going to come up. We know that. But now we're going to be prepared to address those objections. And just doing that, I have found out of the entire process, just doing that is sometimes the most useful thing that an attorney can do to really sign more clients, is to have those objections, responses nailed down, ice cold, so they can just deliver them like that. All right, our last technique today is clear then close. And so this is when you're asking them to sign your fee agreement. Okay, yeah. So we've got a question coming in from Suzanne. So Suzanne's asking, why would the client not have the time? Why would that be an objection if they're looking to hire an attorney? Because if they're looking to hire an attorney, they obviously are going to make the time, right? Well, as it turns out, not all legal services are mandatory. There's, the example I used was filing for a trademark or a patent application. They don't have to do that. They can push that can down the road a while. And there's other examples too that you'll see, maybe whether it's maybe transitioning to a different version of an LLC, right? These different examples are things that they can kick the can down the road. If you're in family law, it's probably, it may not be, time may not be an issue. Estate planning, yes, Aida, great point. They're notorious for that, although oftentimes that may happen after the engagement. But yeah, that's another example. So Suzanne's asking, so you talk to them about urgency. What I talk to them about is why they need to do this now as opposed to later. And that goes really back to their level of dissatisfaction. If we go back here a slide or two. If we go back to painting a picture here, I need to make sure that they have enough dissatisfaction there so that they're going to make time in their schedule to move forward. That's one thing. The other thing is, in the first steps, my job when I'm communicating the first steps is to make sure they understand that, if they're going to hire an attorney, that attorney is going to do everything in their power to make this as simple and as quick as it possibly can for the client, right? And so we address those things head on here. If not, you're going to get it here, which is as an objection. Hey, this is looking kind of complicated. I don't know if I have the time for all of this. And then you talk them through again. Well, if they don't do it, what's the consequence? And by the way, in your process and the way you work with clients, we're trying to make it as efficient for them and as easy for them as possible. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our last technique, which is clear then close. This is when you're getting ready to sign the client for your fee agreement. And there's two things that we do here. So we've gone through, we've built rapport. We've really heard what their needs are. We've talked about our services and how those fit in and help them resolve those needs. We've answered all of their questions. And now we are ready to ask them for the business. And there's a two-step way of doing that. The first thing is called a clearing question. So you just make sure that there's nothing else there that needs to be talked about first. And the clearing question is really simple. It's something like, so have I answered all your questions? Or you might want to say, so do you have any other questions? Right. We're looking for a no. When we get the no, it's our signal to move forward. If we get oh, actually, I just remembered about this and I had a question about that, then by all means, we go back, we answer that question, and then we come back to the clearing question. Okay, so we've answered that. Do you have any other questions? No? Okay, great. And the next step is how you ask for the business. And this is really, really important. There's a lot of different ways to do this. It's called closing. If you look in sales closing techniques, there's a gazillion of them. The one that is the easiest is one that is good for consultative selling. It's super classy. It's very low pressure, and it's really easy to do. And it's called the directive close. And what you do, well, first off, you have to deliver it with confidence, right? And with authority, which you've built by now. It's a statement. It's not a question. So you don't ask them, so do you want to sign my fee agreement? Not at all. It's a statement. We're going to say something. And it has a clear call to action. So the directive approach is something like this. Well, then the next step is to sign the fee agreement, get that retainer, and let's schedule our first meeting. And that's it. Okay. You sit there and you wait. They will either say, okay, or they'll say, actually, I did have a question, or I need to think about it. And sometimes they might really need to think about it. Other times they do have questions that they're just not comfortable asking about. So it's a great way to tease out any of those objections. The key thing about it is it has to be delivered with confidence and delivered as a statement. So just to recap here, the different tactics that we talked about, the techniques that we talked about are caring first. That helps you build the relationship. Asking and listening really helps you identify those needs. Offering, painting a picture and using the Glycerous Formula really helps you offer your service the client will appreciate. Being prepared is how you answer objections, and then clear then close is how you ask for the business. And again, we're not asking you to become a rock star in all these areas. Just a little bit of improvement in one of these areas, or in all of these areas, can really drive things forward. Aida, you're asking me to repeat the statement, and I'm happy to do that. I'm not sure what statement you want me to repeat. So maybe we can talk about that in the Q&A, which should be coming up, or just go ahead and type that again in the chat. Oh, got it. How I asked for the sale. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So it's a two-parter. Okay. This is really important. It's a two-parter statement. The first statement is, it's a question. Do you have any other questions? When the potential client says no, then the response is, well, then the next step is get a check for the retainer agreement of X and to sign the fee agreement. When should we schedule our next meeting? Right. Now, I made that piece up. What happens after the next step is going to be dependent upon you and your process. But you're not actually asking them. The key here is you're not asking them to say, okay, I want to work with you. You're just laying out what the next step is, being really clear about it. Usually it's a combination of a retainer, fee agreement, and a next meeting. Usually it's those things. So we have covered a lot of ground today. I know I threw a lot at you, but I want to hear from you now. So in the chat box, just go ahead and type in what you found most valuable or what you took away from this webinar today. You've invested an hour. I want to hear from you what you got from that investment. Just type that into the chat box now.
While folks are typing their answers, I actually do have a general question for you. I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, but what would you say your behavioral style is, and how do you like to make that work for you when you're engaging with clients?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I get that a lot. When I do this as a group, I usually ask them to guess, and they usually guess an I behavior style. That's actually my lowest. So I'm doing a lot of adapting right now. So my behavior style is a C or an S, depending on what my mood is like at any given time. Awesome. I love some of these things that are coming in. Okay. Learning about the different styles of communication. Thank you, Suzanne. Ted says painting a picture in Glycerous Formula. Awesome. Tony, small changes I can make to how to make presentations to clients. Fabulous. Delton says preparation is critical, and when it is coupled with intention, you are golden. Fantastic. Jonathan, I learned how to transition to the close. Terrific. That is huge. Mark has a question, which we're going to address here in a moment. Nicole, the directive close will be valuable. Super. Courtney says, I appreciate the idea of being prepared to handle objections. Yes, that is key. Jennifer, how to ask for the sale, very valuable. Thank you. Glad to hear that. Raphael says, I realize that I'm not always clearing and closing correctly. Super. Yes. And it's these little changes that can make an absolute huge difference. So let me go back to Mark's question here. Could you elaborate more on how to gauge the disc type of a potential client? Yes. So there's two questions you have to ask yourself. And ideally you ask this before you see the client face to face. Sometimes you can't. First question, are they more outgoing or are they more reserved? That's the first question. The second question is, are they more task focused or are they more people focused? And the answers to those two questions will tell you whether they're a D, I, S, or C. So if they are outgoing and they're task focused, they're a D. If they're outgoing and they're people focused, they're an I. If they're reserved and they're people focused, they're an S. And if they're reserved and task focused, they're a C. And there's a slide further back, it will be in your workbook that you can take a look at. Awesome. Okay. Well, with that, we're wrapping things up. We're going to head into the Q&A. When it comes to, helping attorneys get to that next level, that's what we do. So if this manifesto speaks to you, and you'd like to build your perfect practice, go ahead and email me or send me a LinkedIn message and we will have a conversation. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the Q&A. We have a couple minutes for questions. Please use the Q&A function or the chat box. Let's start with the Q&A. So Iani, do you have anything there?
Nothing in the Q&A box, but in the chat, Suzanne asked, what are signs of someone being people focused?
Yeah, great question, Suzanne. Yeah, so someone who's people focused is going to enjoy the social interactions of interacting with people, and they'll want to do that first. So they're the kind of person who's going to want to ask, so, hey, let's chat for a bit. Let's see how your weekend was. What's going on with you? They're really interested in that interpersonal connection. Someone who's more task focused, they're going to immediately jump to the business at hand. They might ask you, hey, how you doing? Just kind of as a token greeting, but then they dive right into the business. Or sometimes they might even forget to talk to you about you, and they just focus on the project or whatever the task is in front of them. So again, if someone's people focused, they'll want to chit chat a bit first, kind of warm themselves up, warm you up a little bit before you jump into business. People that are task focused are going to jump headlong into business right away.
We've got another question from Tony. It says, is there an optimal amount of time for client meeting? Is 75 minutes too long?
That's a great question. Well, Tony, it depends on if it's your first meeting or not. So the rule of thumb, and by the way, all of this is different for each attorney and each law firm. So I'm not trying to give a blanket response, but I have to say something, right? So in general, the 80% recommendation is your first consultation. I like to do the 15-minute phone call. Okay, nothing more than that. And then if it's more significant, they come into the office for a consultation, and that usually takes about an hour. But again, that just depends on the specific situation. Carrie is asking if a recording will be available, and yes, it will. This webinar is being recorded, and you will get the information on how to access that, as well as the presentations a little bit later. So again, I want to thank CEB for having me here today. The Business of Law webinar series is terrific, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us as well. It's always great having you, and we definitely look forward to having you for future webinars. Just a few notes before we go. Again, this webinar was recorded, and we'll be sending an email with a link to that webinar library right after this. Actually, it looks like there's another question if you have time, Alay.
Sure, yeah.
All right, it says, if you're using an attorney referral services that requires you to give free time, how should you use that, i.e. the initial time?
Yeah, great question. So it's going through that process, knowing that you're not going to get all the way through it. So what you're trying to do with that initial time, that 15-minute call, let's say, is you're trying to determine if they are going to be a good fit for your services. So it's typically building that relationship and listening to their issues. But what you're not going to do is you're not going to go into presenting your services, because you can't get through typically listening through all of their issues and issue spotting and doing the things you need to do in that 15-minute phone call. So you want to establish, is this person a good fit for my practice? Do we have a good relationship? Are they likely to be able to afford my fees? Are they likely to be a good client for me? And if the answer to those is yes, then you bring them in for maybe a paid consultation. If the answer is no, then it's a great opportunity to make a referral.